I am so thankful that I have the opportunity to talk to you young folks about my life in Germany. I am thrilled because the flip charts have been converted into slides, and you can see everything what I was drawing by hand on my stand where the paper is and the flip charts are. So it is a big help for me. Also, I have a pointer here and can point the words which are important. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. You may also ask my wife, Mrs. Pellinat. So I hope you enjoy it. And now, are we ready to go? Yes. Thank you. That's my life in Germany. I was born 1924 in south of Berlin in Germany. And I left the country 1961, and this is also a very important year. I come later to this year, 1961. These are a rough overview what I will cover. I am now here in the introduction, and I will start with my teenage years. Certainly I look old, but I also had teenager years. So this was in the 1930s. And then I was drafted, the World War II started, and with 18 years everybody was drafted into Hitler's army. So 1942 till 45. It was a rough, terrible war in the whole European countries and in Japan in the war. Many people died, and I am thankful I survived this terrible fighting against each other. And 45, the German Reich, means the German government collapsed. I will talk about this later. I worked in East Berlin and will tell you many more details about this. And after everything was over, I am glad to report to you, I started a new life in the USA in 1961. So, and then I will end up with a conclusion. Next, please. My life in Germany, and I will start being a teenager like 10, 12, 14 years. That's where I start to tell you about the life of a teenage guy, and also girls. They had a Hitler Youth, that was a name, and we had to wear uniforms, and we had to, that's very important to learn, we had to line up and count the people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. So we were like easily introduced into kind of a military life, and we didn't notice it. We found it, oh, that's a lots of fun. However, the purpose behind it was very cruel, very bad, because everything was trained to start a war and be the conqueror and having victory over other countries. So the Hitler Youth, and then we had to follow orders by Hitler. Please remember, the war started 1939, and there was bombing and air blitz and the dark windows. If the planes come over Germany, they could see the light. Oh, that's a big city. Everything was darkened. So we had orders by Hitler to help the machinery get in order. For instance, they said, oh, you are boys and you are good enough, young enough to go to municipal buildings, I mean large buildings, and in the basement you have your bed, and then if there's the siren coming with air blitz, you go up to the attic and report to us, is the house burning or not? And you run down the basement saying the house is burning or not. So the orders by Hitler, that was only one example, were actively involved in helping to win the war. Yeah, very important thing, because not always did you have sleep if there were the enemy coming, the American and British Air Force, loaded with big bombs, incinerating bombs, and nobody knew, do they just fly over or do they have an air attack? Now, the next one is, what was the hardship during the war? Certainly food and clothing were rare and very scarce. We had a backyard, and I was even feeding goats to have some milk. We had a little property there. I was mowing the lawn and make feeding and so forth. It was all day, a very workful day. And the fear of being bombed and burned out cities was always there. So the hardship with food and clothing is obvious. If they have clothes, they first use it for the military. If they have food, they first send it to other countries. And what was left over was not much. So the Crystal Night is, which I have to tell you, this terrible night where the Jews had to suffer. We did not know anything of the preparation. There were Hitler people who were excited to serve Hitler. These were the people who took the order from Hitler and punish the Jews and make a list where they lived. And then, at a surprise, they took out the people, the Jewish people, and transporting them into a camp. We thought, what is? But in the camp in Poland, they had to suffer because that was now the concentration camp. So that was the Crystal Night. And then we know what through Christian friends, they were not Jews, but they confessed their faith. And that was against Hitler's idea. The Christian friends were persecuted. And then the parents or the children came and said, you are so kind, you have your own house and a backyard, and my parents are gone, they are in a concentration camp. It was a rough, rough time, which many other Germans did not experience. They thought everything is fine, which is wrong. So Christian friends were persecuted. Next, please. Now came the bad thing, World War II, from 39 to 45. As you know, a total of 55 million people have been killed. Japan, other countries, Germany, France, Poland, including people who were driven into the concentration camps. When Hitler came to power, the whole European country was suffering by a depression of work. It was like in America under Roosevelt, 1932, he recognized we have to do something drastic. Hitler was the guy in saying, we are a people, the German nation, we can do it in ourselves. And this was his motivation, and his motivation to do and get the hands dirty and work was very well accepted. Now, I like to give you ahead of time the air blitz, what happened. We had, I had leave of absence in the fighting line from Italy and went home because my father died. So I was now in my bedroom, and then the alarm was ringing. I went into the basement, and then I heard a terrible crash and noise, and I thought it's better you go upstairs in our own home and look at what the top floor is under the roof. And here I saw my bedroom in flames. Do you know what? The England and Americans had developed so-called hexagonal incinerator bomb. And the pointer was steel, and it was through this weight going through the roof, and after the split seconds, then the flames started burning and maybe burned the whole house. So I was, because of my involvement in the war, in being on vacation, I was having sensed something is wrong. Really, I took the bed sheets and rolled this incinerator bomb and threw it out of the window. And really, actually, I saved the home of my parents in my own home. Those single bombs hit my house. But please remember, there were so many thousands of incinerator bombs that they were able to put almost an entire city into flames. I personally witnessed the destruction of the city of Dresden. Dresden is on the river Elbe, close to Czechoslovakia, a wonderful artist village, all destroyed in one night. And that was the turning point of the war, that Germany was not able to do anything and surrendered. And that was the end of 1945. Unfortunately, those leaders who were responsible, they sensed it's now my responsibility to report why did I kill people in this. They disappeared. There were some countries in South America, they had some kind of connections or fascist friends, and they survived. Very bad. Others were standing for the tribunal, the international, and were killed and hanged. Everybody was hanged by a stick, and those photos were then shown later on. The high leaders who had so much power, they were now dead. Next slide, please. I already told you about my opposition in the war, and the World War ended, but looking at the total experience as a soldier, I had 3 escapes made being successful. As you know, the end of World War II was all the German army was put into prison. Unfortunately, the Russians took me as a prisoner of war, and I had to march each day towards east, away from where you lived. And inside, in our heart, we were bleeding because we knew with strength we didn't have anymore, we probably would not survive a prison camp. Therefore, I put everything in my effort, my thinking and observation, marching. And here was the following, where I was successful to escape the marching road towards Russia. Do you know what happened? Sometimes they had to wait. I mean, there was a row of 6,000 prisoners. Then the next 3 days came another row of 6,000 German soldiers. And when they start marching, and they had just slept on the field, they had to wait, and then the next row of soldiers came, march again, until the whole field was emptied. And this wait and stop gave me the following opportunity. So in a Russian prison camp, there was a ditch and a pipe, and I was able to crawl into the pipe. And another guy came, and we stayed together. And we were so afraid that they could see us. But then we heard the marching, you know, in the pipe. We could hear they are now leaving us. And then we couldn't believe we were free, because they didn't notice us and we were still hiding in the pipe. We were waiting for 14 hours till it was dark, but the pipe was wet and cold. It was in April, May, and we had to endure this, and we were freezing cold. And at night we finally said, we are in freedom. However, that was still an area of war with mines, and you know, because the war just was ended. So we marched each day at night towards our home, and then we felt safe walking by daylight till we came to our homeland. I told you, return home. I was able to. Before I was a prisoner of war, I built a float to come from Czechoslovakia to River Elbe to my home area. This is another headline, pardon me, with the sewer, where I do this. In other words, I had this experience hiding myself as a POW and get out. And then I had East and West later